Ida Mae Cross inherited a movie house worth $5,000. Her brother walked away with the savings account, the paid-off house on Childs Street, and $64,240 their father had spent 43 years setting aside. She drove to Harrodsburg alone, with a box of cleaning supplies, a flashlight, and a key on a ring that still had a grocery tag on it. What she found behind the red velvet curtain on the second floor had been sitting in the dark for 40 years. And her father had written her name on it. Not if she came, when. At 65, after 31 years keeping books for a company that dissolved itself in a Tuesday morning bankruptcy filing, Ida Mae Cross received her inheritance via email. The subject line read, "Re, Estate of Harold B. Cross." She was standing in the parking lot of a Kroger on the edge of Lexington when she read it. The email was 4 paragraphs. The attachment was 11 pages. She read the summary paragraph, put her phone in her coat pocket, and went inside to buy milk. She bought 2%, the store brand, and a loaf of bread she didn't need. Harold Bernard Cross had died on a Sunday in late October, the way he did most things, quietly and without asking anyone's permission. He was 81. He had run the Harrodsburg Movie House on South Main Street for 43 years, opening it the same month Ida was born, and never once closing it for longer than a week until his knees gave out and the projector bulb burned through for the last time in the winter of 2019. After that, he locked the front door, kept paying the utilities for reasons he never explained, and died owing no debts to anyone. His estate consisted of a savings account containing $64,240. 18. A 1997 Buick LeSabre with 212,000 miles. A 2-bedroom house on Childs Street, assessed at $97,500. And the movie house, which had not generated revenue in 4 years, and which the county had assessed at $31,000 for tax purposes, though anyone who looked at it honestly knew that number was generous. The will divided these things as follows. Gerald Cross, aged 62, received the savings account, the house, and the Buick. Ida Mae Cross received the movie house, the keys to which were mailed to her in a padded envelope, along with a single handwritten note from the attorney. Please settle any outstanding property taxes within 90 days. The outstanding property taxes were $3,847. She had $6,200 in checking. Gerald called that evening. He did not open with condolences. He had already delivered those at the funeral, efficiently, in the parking lot of the church before the service began. What he opened with instead was a statement of belief. He believed, he said, that their father had always intended for the movie house to go to him. He had said so, Gerald explained, on multiple occasions. At Christmas 2 years ago, at Easter last spring, once on a Tuesday in July that Gerald remembered clearly because it had been very hot. Ida let him finish. There had been, Gerald continued, some kind of confusion. Possibly the attorney had misread something. Possibly their father, toward the end, had not been entirely clear in his instructions. Gerald was not accusatory about this. He was, as always, reasonable. He presented his position the way he presented most things, as a problem with an obvious solution that simply required the right person to articulate it. Ida said she understood he felt that way. Gerald said he was not asking for a fight. He was asking for a conversation about what made sense. Ida said she would think about it. She did not tell him she had already decided. She had decided in the Kroger parking lot, 43 seconds after reading the email, standing between two shopping carts with her phone in her hand. The decision had arrived not as an emotion, but as a fact, the way most of Ida's decisions arrived, with the quiet finality of a column that balances without explanation. Here is what Gerald had. He had the savings account, which was real money. He had the house on Childs Street, which their father had owned outright since 1998. He had the Buick, which was worth perhaps $3,000 to the right buyer. He had, by Ida's rough calculation, inherited the equivalent of a comfortable retirement supplement, the kind of number a man in his early 60s could look at and feel settled. And he wanted the movie house, too. This was not greed, exactly. Ida understood that. Gerald was not a greedy man in the ordinary sense. He did not accumulate for accumulation's sake, did not hoard or scheme. What Gerald wanted was something more specific and more difficult to argue with. He wanted the world to confirm what he believed his father had promised him. He had built a version of events inside himself, assembled carefully over years from conversations at Christmas and Easter and one hot Tuesday in July. And the will had not matched that version, and the mismatch was, in Gerald's framework, a clerical error to be corrected rather than a decision to be accepted. He was 62 years old, and he had grown up in the same house as Ida, and he had learned different things from the same father, the way children in the same family always do, each one finding in the same man the parent they needed, or the parent they feared, or some combination that became the story they told themselves about who they were and where they came from. Gerald's story required the movie house. He did not know why. He had not examined it that closely. He only knew that when he read the will, something had not matched, and the mismatch had produced in him a certainty as complete and as immovable as any certainty he had ever held. Ida had her own certainties. They were quieter than Gerald's. They did not announce themselves. They simply sat in her, the way a balanced column sits on a page, not dramatic, not demanding attention, just there and accurate and not going anywhere. She put the keys in her purse. She finished her coffee. She called a neighbor to watch her cat, told her she'd be back by Sunday, and the next morning she put her cleaning supplies in the trunk of her Civic and drove 71 miles southwest on the Bluegrass Parkway toward a town she hadn't visited in 11 years, to a building she wasn't entirely sure was still standing, to a door she didn't yet know existed. She arrived in Harrodsburg at 9:14 on a Wednesday morning in November. The town looked the way small Kentucky towns look in November, like it was waiting for something that might not come. The maples along South Main had dropped everything. The hardware store had a hand-lettered sign in the window advertising a sale on weather stripping. A man walking a beagle crossed the street ahead of her without looking up. The movie house was on the south end of the block, between a closed insurance office and an alterations shop that appeared to still be operating a light on in the back, a paper sign on the door listing hours. The movie house itself had no lights anywhere. The marquee letters had been removed at some point, leaving 2 rows of empty tracks and the ghost of a title Ida couldn't reconstruct. The facade was brick, painted cream at some point in the 1970s, now the color of old newspaper. 2 of the 3 front windows had been covered from the inside with brown paper. The third was bare, and through it Ida could see only darkness and the shapes of things she couldn't identify. She sat in the car for a moment. Then she got out, got her cleaning supplies from the trunk, and tried the first key. It didn't fit. She tried the second key. It fit, but didn't turn. She worked it at different angles, the way her father had always said you had to with old locks. Steady pressure and patience, not force. On the fourth attempt, the deadbolt turned with a sound like a knuckle cracking, and the door opened inward, trailing a smell that was immediate and specific. Old velvet, stale popcorn oil, wood that had been breathing recycled air for 4 years. And underneath all of that, faint as a memory, the particular sweetness of carbon arc lamp ozone that Ida associated with nothing else in the world except this building. She stood in the doorway. Then she went in. The lobby was smaller than she remembered. The concession counter ran along the left wall, the sneeze glass filmed with dust, the popcorn machine still in place with its brass fittings and red enamel sides looking less like equipment than like furniture, like something that had simply decided to stay. The carpet was burgundy, or had been, worn down the center to the underlayment from 43 years of foot traffic. The ticket booth in the corner was empty, its window dark, a hand-lettered price list still taped inside the glass. Adults, $6, $50. Children, $4. Seniors, $5.50. She set her cleaning supplies on the counter. She looked at the popcorn machine for a moment. The enamel on the lower right panel had a dent she didn't remember. A long crease, the kind a delivery dolly makes when someone isn't paying attention. Someone had buffed around it at some point, but not repaired it. She put 2 fingers against it and felt the raised edge of the metal. She started with the floor. She swept first, working from the corners toward the center the way she had been taught. And what came up was 4 years of accumulated dust, grit, a scattering of dead moths, 2 pennies, and a ticket stub dated October 14th, 2019, approximately 2 weeks before her father had locked the doors for the last time. The movie had been a Western. She couldn't read the full title on the stub, just the first word, true. She set the stub on the edge of the concession counter. She didn't know why. She was on her second pass with the mop when the front door opened. She had not locked it behind her. She hadn't thought to. The handle turned and a woman came in, small and deliberate in her movements, wearing a wool coat the color of a storm cloud and carrying a paper grocery bag held against her chest with both arms. 78 years old if she was a day, white-haired, with the particular uprightness of someone who had spent decades on her feet and intended to keep doing so. She looked at Ida without surprise. She said, "I saw the car out front." Ida said, "I'm Harold's daughter." The woman said she knew that. She said her name was Loretta Haynes, and that she had been selling popcorn in this lobby since 1969. And that she had been coming by most mornings since it closed, not for any particular reason, just to check on things, the way you check on a place that matters. Ida looked at the bag. Loretta said, "I brought coffee, and one of those lemon loaves from the gas station on Lexington Road. I know it's not much, but I didn't know if you'd had breakfast." Ida had not had breakfast. They sat on the concession counter, Loretta with her coffee and Ida with hers, and Loretta talked about the theater the way people talk about places they love, which is to say, she talked around it, through it, never quite at it. She talked about the families who had come every Friday night for 20 years, the Hendersons, the Mosses, the Pritchard family, who came even after their youngest was born, and would lay him in a laundry basket in the aisle during the feature, and he would sleep through anything. any film, any volume. She talked about the popcorn machine and how Harold had adjusted the temperature by feel because the thermostat had broken in 1994 and he'd never replaced it. Said it wasn't necessary, said he could tell by the sound when it was right. Ida listened. At some point, Loretta said, "He talked about you, you know. Not Gerald, you." Ida didn't answer. Loretta said, "He used to say you were the one who understood what things were worth, not what they cost, what they were worth. He said there was a difference, and most people never learned it." Ida looked at her coffee cup. She said, "He gave Gerald the money." Loretta was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He gave Gerald what Gerald would understand." Ida didn't ask what that meant. She thought about it while she finished her coffee, set the cup down, and picked up her mop. They worked together for the rest of the morning. Loretta dusted the concession counter and the ticket booth and the glass on 3 framed movie posters from the 1980s still hanging in the lobby. Ida mopped and swept and wiped down the push-bar hardware on the auditorium doors until the brass showed through again. Neither of them talked much. The work had its own rhythm, steady and incremental. The kind of labor that gives you something to look at when you're done. One of the posters was for a film Ida had seen in this room in 1984 with her father, and a box of Junior Mints he'd produced from his coat pocket. She remembered the Junior Mints more clearly than the film. She didn't touch the poster. By noon, the lobby looked like a lobby again. They stopped for lunch the second half of Loretta's lemon loaf and the last of the coffee. Loretta said she needed to get back. She had a doctor's appointment at 2. She gathered her bag and her coat and paused at the door. She said, "The upstairs rooms are locked. Harold locked them when he closed. I don't know which key it is, but I'd try the small brass one if I were you. He used that one for things he cared about." Then she left. Ida stood in the lobby alone. She found the small brass key on the ring. It was older than the others, worn smooth at the edges, the kind of key that had been used regularly for a very long time. She put it in her pocket and went back to work. She spent the afternoon in the auditorium, working her way down the rows, straightening seats, pulling a torn armrest free and setting it aside. Around 3 o'clock, the light through the lobby windows shifted to the flat gray of late November afternoon. Around 4, she turned on her flashlight. Around 5, she stopped and sat in one of the seats in the middle of row 7, which was where she had always sat as a child. Always row 7, always the middle, always with her father to her right. The armrest on the seat to her right had a piece of electrical tape wrapped around the hinge from where it had cracked at some point. The tape was old, its edges curled and gray. Her father had fixed it himself rather than replace the seat. She put her hand on the armrest and felt the ridge where the tape ended. She could not remember the last movie they had seen together here. She sat there in the dark, in the quiet, in a room that smelled of 43 years of small-town Fridays, and did not try to remember. Then she got up. She had one more thing she'd told herself she would do before the light went entirely. The auditorium's projection booth was accessible from a door at the back of the theater. She had the key for it. She went up the utility stairs and let herself in. The projector was still there, a carbon arc model, older than she expected, the kind that had been replaced by xenon lamps in most houses before Ida was grown. Her father had kept it running past the point most operators would have retired it. She checked the lamp housing. She ran her hand along the casing, and her fingers came back gray with dust. On the side of the projector, in small block letters, someone had written in white paint marker, "Last lamp change, 1132, 019. Her father's handwriting. Below it, in the same hand, bulb in storage closet, left shelf. She looked toward the storage closet. The door was closed. She was leaning to look at the base of the projector when her foot caught the edge of a box on the floor. She went down hard on one knee, caught herself on the projector housing, and the box slid sideways and opened, spilling a cascade of loose reels across the concrete floor. Not canisters, loose reels, bare film coiled on plastic spools, unlabeled, tangled now against the base of the projector stand. She crouched on the floor in the dark and looked at them. 11 reels. Some of the leader tape had detached. 2 had unspooled partially, the film lying in loose coils on the dusty concrete. 11 reels of film, unhoused, on the floor of an unheated projection booth in November in Kentucky. She held her flashlight close to the first reel and looked at a single frame, an outdoor scene, summer. A group of people at what appeared to be a picnic, 1970s by the clothing and the color cast. A woman in a yellow dress turned away from the camera. A child's arm reaching for something outside the frame. Whoever had filmed this had stopped and started. There was a visible splice in the leader, the kind made with a thumbnail and tape. Someone had cared enough to repair this once. Her father, or whoever had given it to him. She did not know whose films these were. She spent 40 minutes carefully respooling what she could, laying the reels back in the box as gently as she could manage, separating the tangled ones with strips of paper she tore from Loretta's grocery bag. She worked slowly, in the cold, in the dark, on her knees, and when she was done, she was not confident it was enough. She carried the box down and set it on the concession counter and stood looking at it. 11 reels. Unknown condition. Unknown owner. In a building she had been here one day and already did not understand. She took the ticket stub from the edge of the counter, the one she had swept up that morning. October 14th, 2019. Just the first word. True. And set it on top of the box. She didn't know why she did that either. It felt like the right place for it. She locked the front door behind her and drove to the motel. She ate a hamburger from the drive-thru on the way. She sat in the motel room and called her neighbor to check on the cat, and went to bed at 9:15. The last thing she thought before she fell asleep was the smell of the lobby, not the dust, not the old carpet. The other smell. The carbon arc sweetness and popcorn oil and old velvet that was the smell of every Friday night in her childhood. The smell of sitting in row 7, the smell of her father to her right in the dark, watching. She was asleep before she finished the thought. The next morning, Loretta was already on the front step with 2 paper cups when Ida pulled up at 7:30. Ida showed her the box. Loretta looked at the reels for a long time. Then she said, "He would have had a reason for keeping those separate. He always had a reason. I just don't know what it was." She paused. She said, "There's a man in Lexington, retired now, used to maintain the equipment for 4 theaters in the region. Harold called him whenever something needed proper attention. His name is Ray Cutter. I have his number somewhere at home." Loretta went to get the number. They worked through the second morning the same way they had worked through the first parallel. Quiet, each taking a section, the easy rhythm of 2 people who have stopped narrating their movements to each other. Ida found, behind the concession counter, a hand-lettered schedule tacked to the wall with 2 pushpins. Showtime slots going back to 2018, her father's handwriting, the last entry circled in pencil, Friday, November 1st, 2019. True Grit, 7 p.m. and 9:15 p.m. She left it where it was. Around 10 o'clock, Ida's phone rang, a Lexington number she didn't recognize. The man on the line said his name was Ray Cutter, and Loretta Haynes had just called him, and he understood there were some loose reels in uncertain condition. Ida said, 11 of them, acetate, I think. They were in an unheated booth. Ray Cutter was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Don't move them again. Don't try to unwind them. Keep them in the coolest, dry spot you can find, and I'll come down Friday morning and take a look. No charge." Harold Cross let me screen a print of Lawrence of Arabia for my son's birthday in 1987, and never sent me a bill. I've been meaning to find a way to settle that for a while. He hung up before she could thank him. Ida stood in the auditorium aisle with her phone in her hand. She looked at the back of the lobby. She could see, from where she was standing, the faint outline of the velvet curtain against the far wall. In the morning light, it was just a curtain, a piece of old fabric someone had hung there and never taken down. She had been in this building for 2 days. She had cleaned the lobby and the auditorium. She had found 11 reels in an unheated booth and gotten someone to come look at them. She had swept up a ticket stub and a handful of dead moths and 2 pennies and a piece of her father's last Friday night. She had sat in row 7 in the dark. She had not touched the curtain. I need to stop here for a moment, because I have been telling you this story in the order it happened, and that order is not the order of what matters. What matters is what was already up there, behind that curtain, while Ida was downstairs mopping and straightening seats and going to bed at 9:15. What matters is what her father had left ready, loaded, waiting in the dark, not for if she came, for when. And she was standing 20 feet away from it, in a building she had been given for reasons she was only beginning to understand, and she hadn't looked at the curtain yet. What she found next wasn't what any of us expected. But standing in that lobby with a flashlight and a pocket full of keys, and 40 years of questions she hadn't known she was carrying looking back now, it was the only thing that made sense. She was back at the movie house by 7:30 the next morning. She had not planned to go to the curtain first. She had planned to finish the auditorium, to work through the remaining rows on the right side. She had a list. She had always worked from lists. But she stood in the lobby with her flashlight and her coffee, and she looked at the back wall, and she knew she was not going to do the rows first. The back wall was hung with a curtain. Not the auditorium curtains, those were burgundy like the carpet. This was a backdrop, a theatrical flat, a piece of scenery someone had hung against the back wall and apparently left there. It was red velvet, or had been red, now the color of dried roses, 12 feet wide and floor to ceiling, hung on a rod that ran the width of the wall. There was nothing remarkable about it. Theater lobbies collect things, people leave things, but it didn't belong there. She set her coffee on the concession counter and walked toward it. She put her hand against the fabric, stiff with age and dust, heavier than it looked. She took hold of the edge and pulled it to one side. The dust came down like snow. She turned her face away and waited. When she turned back, her flashlight found what was behind the curtain. A door, plain wood, painted the same cream as the lobby walls, fitted so flush it was nearly invisible without the angle of light. A door-shaped rectangle in the plaster with a small brass keyhole, the same size as the small brass key in her pocket. She stood there. The key was in her pocket. The door was in front of her. She held both facts without moving for a long moment. She did not open it that morning. This was not a decision she made consciously. It was simply what happened. She stood in front of the door, her hand on the key in her pocket, and then she put the flashlight down on the concession counter and sat on the lobby floor with her back against the curtain rod and looked at the ceiling. The ceiling was pressed tin, painted white, the pattern a repeating grid of small flowers inside squares. Her father had repainted it in 1989. She had been there 29 years old, on a ladder in the corner, helping him roll the second coat because he didn't want to pay a painter, and she was the only one who'd offered. They had painted all day on a Saturday in June. Her father had brought sandwiches. They had not talked much. They had painted and listened to the radio on an extension cord from the office, and at some point in the afternoon a song had come on that she didn't know the name of, and her father had hummed along under his breath, and she had made a note to herself to ask him what it was. She had never asked. She sat on the floor and did the arithmetic she had been not doing since she pulled into the parking lot the morning before. The movie house had operated for 43 years in a town of 8,000 people, with ticket prices that had not crossed $7 at any point in the last decade. She knew what a single-screen movie house in a small Kentucky town could generate. 200 seats on a Friday night, half that on a Saturday matinee, maybe 60 on a Tuesday. Call it 400 tickets a week on a good week, at an average price of $5.50. That was $2,200 a week, before film rental, before utilities, before the popcorn machine's quarterly service, and the carpet cleaning, and the HVAC, and the liability insurance, and the property tax. She had seen her father's ledger. She knew what he made. She knew what he kept. A man running a single-screen movie house in Harrodsburg, Kentucky for 43 years did not accumulate significant wealth. He accumulated, if he was careful, enough. The savings account had $64,240.18 in it. Gerald had that now. And Ida had a movie house with outstanding property taxes of $3,847.00, and a door behind a velvet curtain with a brass keyhole. She understood numbers. Numbers told you what happened. They did not tell you what it meant. She sat on the floor until her back stiffened. Then she got up, stretched, and looked at the curtain. She had thought while she was sitting there about her mother. Her mother had died on a Tuesday in February 14 years ago, fast and without warning, the kind the doctor said sometimes happened that way. Ida had driven home from Lexington and stayed 2 weeks, and then gone back and done what you do, which is continue. Her father had gone quiet in a way he hadn't been before, and then gradually less quiet and eventually more or less himself again, though a different arrangement of himself. The way things are when something is removed from the center. They had not talked about it, not really. There had not been a language for it between them. That was not a failure. It was a fact about two particular people and the particular silence they had always shared, which was large enough to hold many things and always had. Her father had repainted this ceiling the summer he turned 70. Ida hadn't been there for that one. She had called to check in and he had mentioned it, casually, the way he mentioned most things he did, not as an accomplishment, but as a task completed. The ceiling needed a coat. He had done it. That was all. She had not thought to ask who had held the ladder. She put the key in the lock. She turned it. The lock opened on the first try. The door swung inward. She pushed it. It moved on hinges that had been oiled recently enough that they made no sound, which stopped her. Hand flat against the wood. Someone had oiled these hinges, Not 4 years ago, not 10. The oil was still clean, still pale, the kind of maintenance you do to a thing you intend to keep using. She stood in the doorway with her flashlight and looked up. Stairs, narrow, wood-framed, rising steeply into darkness. She tested the first tread. It held. No flex, no complaint. She went up. The staircase turned once a shallow switchback at the halfway point, then continued to a small landing and a second door, this one standing slightly open, 3 inches of darkness at the edge. The air on the landing was different, drier, cooler by several degrees. It smelled of cedar and paper and something she couldn't name immediately, a faint chemical sweetness that sat at the back of her throat and was gone before she could place it. She put her hand against the second door. She pushed it open. The room was long and low, running the full width of the building above the lobby, with a ceiling that peaked at 8 feet in the center and sloped to 4 at the outer walls. No windows. The only light was her flashlight, which she moved slowly across the room in a single sweep before she stepped inside. Along the left wall, steel shelving units, floor to ceiling, 12 feet of them, each shelf loaded with flat metal canisters the size and shape of cake tins, stacked 4 high, each one labeled in her father's handwriting in black marker. Names, dates: Henderson, 1974 to 2019. Moss family, 1981 to 2017. Pritchard, 1986 to 2004. She counted the shelves, 6 of them, each one full. Along the right wall, a workbench, low and wide, with a lamp clamped to one end. She found it was still plugged in. She clicked it on. The bulb worked. A yellow circle of light fell across the surface of the bench, which held a film editor, one of the old flatbed kind, and beside it a pair of white cotton editing gloves placed neatly together, and a loop on a short chain, and a small notebook open to a page of her father's handwriting. She did not read the notebook yet. At the far end of the room, a small reel-to-reel projector on a stand pointed toward a square of white painted plaster on the opposite wall that served as a screen. Beside the projector, a wooden stool. Beside the stool, a thermos. She walked to the thermos. She picked it up and shook it. Empty. She put it down. She walked to the shelving. The names were alphabetical by first letter, loosely the way a person organizes things for their own use. She found C near the left side of the first shelf. 7 canisters labeled with names beginning with C. She moved her flashlight across them slowly. Combs, Carpenter, Combs again, Coleman, Crawford, Cross. She stopped. Cross. 1 canister. The label read, Cross Family, 1979 to 2019. She looked at it for a moment. The canister was the same as the others, flat, round, silver metal, entirely ordinary. It sat in its place between Crawford and the next name along, tended and stored and waiting with the same patience her father had given everything else. She did not take it down yet. She made herself finish the survey of the room first, the way she would finish reading a column before correcting an entry. She walked the length of the shelves and counted the canisters. 214. 214 flat tins, each one labeled, each one holding whatever it held. Some of the labels were in fresher ink replacements, she guessed, for labels that had faded or peeled. Her father had relabeled them. He had maintained the system of identification the same way he had maintained everything else in this room, not dramatically, not with announcement, just steadily, the way a person tends a thing they have committed to tending, regardless of whether anyone is watching. She picked up one at random from the middle shelf. Stanton Family, 1983 to 1997. 14 years of Stantons. She set it back carefully, exactly where it had been, in the groove the base had worn into the shelf over 40 years. She stood in the center of the room and turned slowly. The shelves, the workbench, the projector, the stool, the thermos her father had left empty on his last visit to this room, whenever that had been, and had not come back to fill. She understood what the room was. She understood it all at once, the whole picture arriving complete before she had time to question any part of it. The canisters were home movies, 8mm film, the format of every American family from 1965 through the 1980s. The format that recorded birthdays and Christmases and summer afternoons and all the Fridays that would otherwise have left no record of themselves. The families of Harrodsburg had given their films to Harold Cross, and Harold Cross had stored them here in this dry, cool room above his lobby, and had repaired them and maintained them and screened them on the small projector against the white painted wall alone, on a wooden stool, with his thermos watching 40 years of other people's Fridays. She thought about that for a long time, about what it meant to spend 40 years in a room no one knew existed, watching other people's summers. Not out of loneliness, she thought, or not only that. Her father had not been a lonely man in the ordinary sense. He had been a man who moved through the world at a specific frequency, one that most people couldn't quite tune to, and had found in this room and this work and these 214 flat tins a purpose that fit the frequency exactly. He had not needed anyone to know about it. That was the part she kept coming back to. He had done it for 40 years in a room above a lobby, alone, and had told one person, Loretta, who sold popcorn and came by most mornings to check on things, and had not told another soul, including his own children, because telling would have made it something else. It would have made it charity, or generosity, or legacy building. And it wasn't any of those things. It was simply work. Work he believed in. Work he did because the films needed to be kept, and he had the space and the patience and the 40 years to give to it. Her right hand found the edge of the workbench. She held it. The wood was smooth there, worn smooth along that edge the way wood gets worn when a person stands in the same place for a very long time. She pressed her fist against her mouth. She looked at the wall. She stood very still. If you've made it this far into Ida's story, hit subscribe, because what I found in that room is the part I have been waiting to tell you. After a long time, she picked up the notebook. She started from the beginning. The first entry was dated September 1979, the same month Ida had started her second year of community college, and it read, "First delivery today. Benny Kowalski brought 3 reels, summer 74 through 78. Said the garage floods every spring and he's afraid of losing them. I told him I had the space. I have the space." She turned the page. October 1979. Henderson family brought 2 reels. Earl said his wife couldn't watch them anymore since her mother passed, but didn't want to throw them away. I told him I'd keep them safe. I will. November 1979. Rigged the upstairs room with the Steenbeck. Checked the humidity. Needs to stay below 50% or the acetate base will go. Ordered a dehumidifier from the catalog, $14. She turned pages. The entries were intermittent, sometimes weekly, sometimes months apart. Her father's handwriting changed slowly over the decades, growing more compressed, the letters drawn more carefully as the hand aged. But the voice didn't change. It was the same voice throughout, matter-of-fact, specific, attentive to detail in the way of a person who understood that detail was the whole point. January 1985. Spliced the Moss reels from 81, color still good. The birthday sequence with the youngest girl is remarkable. They don't know they have it. March 1992. 241 families now need a second shelf unit. She stopped at that. 241 families in 1992. She looked at the shelves. 214 canisters now. Some had moved away, some had claimed their reels, some lines had simply ended. 214 was what remained. The entries from the 2000s were less frequent. Her father's knees had begun their long complaint around 2003, and the stairs would have been harder, but the entries continued. Repairs noted, new deliveries recorded, the occasional remark about a sequence that had caught his attention. August 2011. Ran the Pritchard reels tonight, 1991 Christmas. The youngest one, the boy, must be 30 now. He doesn't know his grandmother sang to him in that kitchen. I wonder if anyone ever told him. She put the notebook down. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the canisters on the shelves and thought about a man who had run a movie house in a small Kentucky town for 43 years, who had charged $6.50 for adults and $4 for children, and had opened on Tuesday nights to show old films to whoever wanted to come, and who had spent 40 years in a room above his lobby, alone, repairing other people's memories on a $14 dehumidifier and a pair of white cotton gloves, watching birthdays and Christmases and summer afternoons that most of the people in them had forgotten they still had. She thought about what Loretta had said. He gave Gerald what Gerald would understand. She thought about what it meant that her father had kept 40 years of her family's film in a canister with the same careful label as every other family in this town. Not separate, not special, not in a box marked for her. Just there, in alphabetical order, tended and stored and waiting with the same patience he'd given everything else. She picked up the white cotton gloves. She put them on. She lifted the Cross family canister and carried it to the projector. The projector was threaded. There was already a reel on it, the take-up reel, empty and waiting, the feed reel loaded with film, the leader already run through the gate and attached, ready to run. Her father had loaded it and not run it, or had run it and reloaded it. Either way, he had left it ready. The way you leave a thing ready when you intend to come back to it. She looked at the label on the feed reel, a small piece of adhesive tape applied in her father's hand in black marker. She read it. She read it twice. It said, "For Ida, when she gets here." She put the canister down on the workbench. She sat on the stool. She put her hands flat on her thighs and looked at the 4 words on the tape and did not speak. Not if. When. She sat for a long time. Then she reached out and switched on the projector. The motor engaged. The reel began to turn. The lamp threw its beam through the gate and through the lens and hit the white painted wall at the end of the room, and the film began. It was a Tuesday afternoon in summer. The image slightly overexposed, the way home movies from the early 1980s often are. the colors warm and bleached at the edges. The camera was pointed at a kitchen table, and at the table sat a young woman with dark hair cut to her shoulders, bent over a ledger book, writing. She was 22 years old, and she did not know she was being filmed. She wrote in the ledger for a moment. Then she looked up at something outside the frame and said something, and whoever was behind the camera said something back, and the young woman laughed, not a polite laugh, a real one, sudden and unguarded, the kind that happens before you have time to decide whether you're going to let it. Then she looked back at the ledger and kept writing. The film ran for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Ida counted. She sat on the stool in the dark and watched herself at 22 years old, bent over her father's bookkeeping in his kitchen on a Saturday in June. And she counted the seconds because she needed something to do with her hands, and she had nothing to do with her hands. When it ended, the screen went white, and the take-up reel spun free, and the projector motor ticked in the silence. She reached out and switched the projector off. She went to the shelves and found the cross-family canister and opened it. Inside were 7 reels, each wound neatly on its spool, each labeled in her father's handwriting with a year or a range. The earliest said 1979 to 1982. The latest said 2018. 7 reels, 39 years. She did not watch them, not yet. She set them out on the workbench in order and looked at them. 7 spools of acetate and silver halide that her father had carried upstairs and maintained in a dry room for 40 years. And she thought about what it cost to do that. Not in money, in the other currency. The one that doesn't balance neatly. The one that runs in one direction only. She thought about the film. 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Her father behind the camera, she at the kitchen table, the June light coming through the window she couldn't see. He had been 60 that summer. She had been 22. She had been teaching him bookkeeping, and he had been filming her without her knowing. And whatever he had seen through that lens, whatever had made him press the button and keep it pressed for 4 minutes and 37 seconds, he had carried it up these stairs and stored it in a dry room and left it threaded in a projector for however many years it took for her to arrive. She put the reels back in the canister. She closed the lid. She sat on the stool for a moment with her hands in her lap and looked at the white painted wall the projector had been aimed at. The paint was flat and slightly yellowed, and there was a water stain in the upper left corner, a brown ring from some long ago leak in the roof, sealed over but still visible. Her father had painted over it once. It had come back. He had left it after that. She picked up the notebook and started again from the first entry, slowly this time, reading everything. And interspersed through the entries, irregular and without announcement, were the ones that weren't about the film. October 1983. Ida called tonight. She has a job offer in Lexington. She's going to take it. I told her I was glad. I am glad. She has always been better than this town could hold. March 1991. Gerald came by the house. He wants me to invest in something he's working on. I told him I didn't have the capital. He took it well. He's a good boy. He wants things clearly, that's all. Some people need the world to be clear. September 1997. Ida was here for the weekend. She helped me repaint the auditorium ceiling. We didn't talk much. She's good at that, at being somewhere without needing it to be something. Her mother was the same way. I didn't tell her that. I should have. She read that entry twice. Then she set the notebook down and looked at the ceiling. January 2016. I've been thinking about the scholarship fund. 67 people over 40 years. Some of them I knew, most of them I didn't. I kept the records in the office downstairs, the green folders in the lower cabinet. Ida will find them. She knows how to read records. She stopped. The green folders in the lower cabinet. She had not been in the office. She came downstairs carrying the notebook. The lobby was empty. Loretta had gone quietly at some point. Ida went behind the concession counter and opened the office door. Small room, desk, phone, filing cabinet. A window onto the alley. The desk was clear except for a stapler and a mug holding 3 pens. The chair was pushed in. Everything orderly in the way of a person who expected to come back. She opened the lower cabinet. Green folders, 8 of them, each labeled in her father's handwriting. Film Arts Scholarship, followed by a year range. The earliest was 1981 to 1985. The latest was 2015 to 2019. She took out the earliest folder and opened it. The first entry was a young woman from Harrodsburg named Cecilia Marsh, 1981. $800 toward film studies at the University of Kentucky. A note in her father's handwriting clipped inside. Good work, December 1989. The second was a young man named Darius Webb, 1982, $600 toward photography at a community college in Louisville. No follow-up note, just the entry, the amount, and a blank space where a note might have gone. The third was a young woman named Patricia Coles, 1983, $1,200 toward art school in Cincinnati. A note clipped to her entry. She sent a photograph. It's on the wall in the upstairs room. Ida stopped at that one. She read it again. She looked at the date on the note. 1987, 4 years after the scholarship. The girl had gone to Cincinnati and come back with something worth sending. Her father had received it at a post office box that Ida now understood had been his mailing address for 40 years, and he had taken it upstairs and framed it and hung it where he could see it from his stool. She kept reading. The fourth entry, the fifth, the sixth. Each one a name, an amount, a purpose written in the same matter-of-fact hand her father used for everything. Film repair notes, humidity readings, the cost of a $14 dehumidifier in 1979. He had not written these as charitable acts. He had written them as records. The way you write down an expense or a deposit. The way you keep track of something you consider a normal part of operating. She opened the 2015 to 2019 folder and added the column in her head, the way she had always done arithmetic. She went through all 8 folders. She sat with the folders on her lap and the total she had arrived at and looked at the desk. The scholarship fund had distributed $156,000 over 38 years, and that number, as large as it was, turned out to be the least surprising thing in that office. She looked more carefully at the source column, the one she had almost skimmed past, which listed where the money came from. Not from operations, from a separate account listed in the ledger as FA Fund. She traced the FA Fund entries backward, folder by folder, until she reached the earliest one. The initial deposit to the FA Fund was dated June 1981. The amount was $42,000. The source was listed as Sale of Collection, Private. She sat with that. She went back upstairs and stood in the center of the archive room and looked at the framed photographs on the far wall above the projector. She crossed to them and held her flashlight close. They were originals, hand-stamped on the back. The first was a black and white photograph, a composition of light and shadow, A single tree in a field, the grain of the film visible. In the lower right corner, in pencil, P. Coles, 1987. 67 people over 40 years. She came back downstairs. She sat in the chair near the ticket booth as the November afternoon folded into evening and the lobby grew dim. She needed to call Gerald. She knew this the way she knew most things she was obligated to do, not with enthusiasm, but with the clear understanding that avoiding it didn't change what it was. Gerald had grown up in the same family. He had a right to know what his father had built up here, even if he'd never known to look for it, even if the building and everything in it was legally hers, even if the 4 words on the tape said her name and not his. She was going to have to be the kind of person who told him anyway. That was not generosity. It was just what was correct. She sat in the dark and thought about what she would say, and how she would say it, and which parts she would show him first. And she thought about the notebook entry from 1991. He wants things clearly, that's all. Some people need the world to be clear, and she understood that she was going to have to give Gerald something clear. Not explanations, not the full weight of 40 years of her father's inner life, which Gerald had no framework for and would only find disorienting. Something he could look at and hold in his hands and understand in the direct, practical way he understood things. The green folders, she decided. She would start with the folders. She thought about Gerald, about what she would say to him. She was going to have to show him, not explain, show. And then she looked at the column she had almost skimmed past in the earliest folder. The applications to the Film Arts Fund of Central Kentucky were listed alphabetically by recipient. She had been moving through them quickly. The entry was dated September 1981. The recipient was listed as Cross, Ida M. The amount was $900. The purpose? Accounting Studies, Community College. She sat in the chair as the lobby went dark, and the full weight of the third revelation arrived, not all at once, but in stages, the way certain kinds of understanding arrive. First the fact, then the implication, then the thing behind the implication that changes the shape of everything you thought you already knew. Her father had paid for her education, not visibly. Not as a father paying tuition, which she would have noticed and questioned and probably refused. As a fund administrator, distributing grants from a scholarship program she had applied to on her own merits and been awarded through a process that had looked, from her side of it, entirely impersonal. She had found that scholarship herself. She had been proud of finding it herself. She had carried that pride for 40 years without knowing what was underneath it. He had arranged it so she would never know. He had arranged it so she would believe she had done it herself. He had made both things true at once. She sat in the dark lobby of the Harrodsburg movie house for a long time. She thought about being 19 years old and sitting in this same lobby on a Friday night in 1979, eating popcorn her father had made by sound because the thermostat was broken, watching a film she couldn't now remember on a screen she could now see from this chair. She thought about the scholarship application. She had found it in the community college financial aid office, in a folder labeled Local Awards, Arts and Humanities. She had filled it out by hand in 2 sittings, at the kitchen table in her apartment. She had written about her plans in the essay section, and she had been proud of what she wrote, proud of the clarity of it, proud that she had found the thing herself without asking anyone for help. She had received the award letter 6 weeks later. $900 applied directly to her account. The Film Arts Fund of Central Kentucky. A post office box in Harrodsburg. She had thought, at the time, Someone in this town believes in this kind of work, she had thought. I want to be the kind of person who does something like that someday. She had been sitting in his lobby 2 years later, teaching him his ledger, and he had filmed her without her knowing. And he had gone upstairs and stored the film in a canister and put her name on it and put it on the shelf and waited. She sat in the dark. The lobby held its air around her, cool and still and smelling of old velvet and the ghost of 43 years of Fridays, and she held in return the weight of what she had learned in this room over 4 days, which was heavier than any number she had ever added, and more accurate, and not going anywhere. Gerald came on Saturday. He arrived at 10 in the morning in the LeSabre and parked in front of the building and sat in the car for a moment before getting out, looking at the facade the way people look at things they are preparing an opinion about. He was 62 years old, and he looked like their father from certain angles, the set of the jaw, the way he held his shoulders, though he had always been taller and had always moved with a different kind of certainty. The certainty of a man for whom most things had resolved the way he expected. He got out and said, "You cleaned the windows." Ida said, "The front one was already clean. I did the other two." He looked at the building. Then he said, "It's in better shape than I expected." She said, "Come inside." Loretta was already there, had been since 8, and had brought coffee and a box of donuts from the bakery on Main. She was behind the concession counter when they came in, and she looked at Gerald with the particular assessment of a woman who had been watching the Cross family for 50 years. He said to Ida, "Who's this?" Loretta said, "Loretta Haynes. I sold popcorn here for 40 years. Gerald said, "Right, I remember you." Loretta handed him a coffee. He took it. Ida showed him the building. First, the lobby, the auditorium, the office. She let him read the room the way she had let the numbers read themselves to her before she added the columns. Gerald moved through the spaces methodically, asking practical questions. What was the square footage? What was the roof situation? What were the code requirements for public assembly? He was not dismissive. He was, in his way, taking it seriously. Then she took him upstairs. She had unlocked the door that morning and turned on the workbench lamp, and left the projector as it was, loaded and ready, the 4-word label visible from the doorway. She went up first and stood to one side when Gerald reached the top of the stairs and stepped into the room. He stopped. He turned his flashlight slowly across the shelves. He read labels for a moment without speaking. He walked to the shelving and stood close, reading names. After a while, he said quietly, "How many?" Ida said, 214 families. He was quiet for a long time. He walked to the workbench and looked at the notebook and the editing gloves and the projector. He looked at the reel on the projector. He read the 4 words on the label. He picked it up, turned it in his hands, set it down. He said, "He knew you'd come." Ida said, "Yes." Gerald looked at the shelves again. He looked at the narrow screen at the end of the room, the white-painted plaster square her father had aimed a projector at for 40 years. He looked at the stool. He looked at the empty thermos. He said, "I didn't know this was here." Ida said, "I know." He said, "He never told me." She said, "No." He said nothing for a moment. His jaw worked once. He did not look at her. She said, "There are folders in the office downstairs, green ones in the lower cabinet. I need you to read them." He read them at the office desk, while Ida and Loretta waited in the lobby. It took him 40 minutes. Ida could hear him turning pages. She could hear him stop turning pages. She could hear him start again. When he came out, his face had the quality of a man who has received information that doesn't fit the framework he brought with him and is working out in real time what to do about that. He said, "The Film Arts Fund." Ida said, "Yes." He said, "He set it up himself." "Yes." He said, "You didn't know." She said, "I applied like everyone else." Gerald looked at the ticket booth. He looked at the price list still taped inside the glass. Adults, $6.50. Children, $4. Seniors, $5.50. He looked at it for a long moment. He said, "I told him once that you were too proud to take money from him. I said you'd never accept it directly. I said he should just leave you more in the will." Ida said, "When was this?" He said, "A long time ago. 1983, maybe, when you were in school." Ida said, "What did he say?" Gerald said, "He said you weren't too proud. He said you just needed to earn it yourself. He said he could make both things true at once." The lobby was quiet. Loretta, at the counter, was looking at the pressed tin ceiling. Ida looked at her brother. She had known Gerald for 62 years, and she had spent a portion of those years being frustrated by him, and a portion being fond of him, and a portion neither, just adjacent to him, the way siblings who have been shaped by the same forces and emerged differently are adjacent, the way two trees planted close together grow in different directions toward the same light. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had wanted things to be clear and had arranged his life near things that were clear, and their father, who was not a clear man in the way Gerald needed, had loved him by giving him what he could recognize. The house on Chiley Street, the savings account, the Buick with 212,000 miles. And to Ida he had given a door behind a velvet curtain, and a room with 214 names on it, and a reel on a projector, and 4 words that said, "When, not if." Gerald said, "What are you going to do with it?" She said, "Keep it open." He looked at her. She said, "The archive needs a conservator. The films need to be digitized before the acetate goes. The scholarship fund can be reconstituted. The building needs work, but the structure is sound, and people should be able to see their films again." He said, "That costs money." She said, "I know what it costs. I've been doing the math." He said, "I could help with some of it." Ida said, "I know." He said, "I'm not saying I will. I'm saying I could." She said, "I heard you." He stood there for a moment, with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the auditorium doors. Then he said he needed to get on the road. He had a thing in the evening, and Ida walked him out, and they stood on the sidewalk. And both of them looked at the empty marquee tracks. He said, "He used to let me change the letters when I was a kid. He'd lift me up to reach the high ones." Ida said, "I remember." He said, "I thought it was the best job in the world." He got in the LeSabre and drove back toward the Bluegrass Parkway. Ida stood on the sidewalk until she couldn't hear the engine anymore. Then she went back inside. The community dinner was Loretta's idea, though she presented it as something already decided, rather than as a suggestion. She said, "3rd Saturday of December. Here, you cook, I'll bring the table." Ida said, "I don't have chairs." Loretta said, "Auditorium seats 412. I think we can manage." They opened the doors on a Saturday evening in December with a borrowed folding table in the lobby, a pot of chili from the diner on Lexington Road, and 3 pies from the bakery on Main. Loretta had made calls, not announcements, calls, one person at a time, specific, personal, the way her father had run his Tuesday night screenings. 67 people came. They came in ones and twos and in groups of 3, stamping their feet on the threshold against the cold, looking around the lobby with expressions that were various combinations of surprise and recognition and something harder to name. A man named Earl Henderson introduced himself, shook Ida's hand, and said he'd been coming to this theater since he was 7 years old. He said his daughter was born in 1981, and he'd given Harold 4 reels from that year and had forgotten all about it until Loretta called him on a Tuesday, and his wife had cried for 10 minutes before she could come to the phone. A woman named Patricia Coles, who was 63 now, and whose black and white photograph still hung on the wall upstairs, stood in the lobby for a long time without saying anything. Then she said, "I sent that photograph to a post office box. I never knew who received it." Ida said, "He framed it. It's upstairs." Patricia Coles pressed her fist against her mouth. She looked at the auditorium doors. She said, "Can I see it?" They went up together, Ida and Patricia Coles and Earl Henderson and Loretta and a dozen others who had been listening, and Ida turned on the workbench lamp and let the yellow circle fall across the room. Patricia Coles stood in front of her photograph for a long time. She said, "I was 22 years old when I made this. I took it on a Tuesday morning in October. I thought at the time it was the best thing I'd ever made. I still think so." A woman named June Ratliff, 71, who had grown up 3 blocks from the theater, found Ida near the ticket booth later in the evening and said, "I used to see the light in that upstairs window late at night for years. I always thought he'd left it on by accident." Ida said, "He was working." "On what?" "On keeping things. That was what he did here. I always thought he just showed movies." He did that too. A man named Roy Carpenter, 58, who had not been inside this building since 1987, found Ida at the concession counter and said, "My mother gave him 3 reels in 1974. She died in 1991, and I thought those films were gone. I've been thinking about that since Loretta called me. I've been thinking about it for 3 days." He said it the way people say things they have not known they needed to say until they were already saying them. One by one through the evening they came and found her in the corner by the ticket booth, by the auditorium doors, in the narrow space between the concession counter and the popcorn machine. And they said versions of the same thing. Some had known their families had given Harold film and had not thought about it in years. Some had not known at all. Some said they had always wondered who had helped them with one thing or another, and had never been able to find out. A woman named Della Sykes, who taught 3rd grade at the elementary school on Maple, and who had grown up in the house directly behind the movie house, and had watched the building's back windows her whole childhood, found Ida near the auditorium doors and said, "I used to hear the projector running at night sometimes, when the wind was right. I told my mother once, and she said I was imagining things. I never thought I was." Ida said, "You weren't." Della Sykes nodded. She looked at the auditorium doors. She said, "Did he ever watch them with anyone?" Ida said, "Once in a while, if someone needed to." Della Sykes said, "I didn't know him well. I knew his back window, and I knew the sound of his projector, and I knew he showed movies on Friday nights for 40 years. I thought that was the whole of it." Ida said, "Most people did. The last people left at 10:30. Loretta helped fold the table. They turned off the lobby lights and stood for a moment in the dark before Ida opened the front door, the two of them in the lobby that smelled of chili now, and coffee, and the residue of 67 people on a December evening. Loretta said, "He would have liked tonight." Yes. She locked the door behind them. She stood on the sidewalk and looked at the empty marquee tracks, the 2 rows of metal channels running the width of the facade. She had ordered letters that afternoon. They would arrive Wednesday. She walked to her car. The street was empty, the hardware store dark, the alterations shop closed. A thin wind came down Main and moved through the maple branches that had been bare since October. She sat in the Civic for a moment before starting the engine. What a father leaves behind is not always money. Sometimes it is evidence kept carefully in the dark that he saw exactly who you were long before you saw it yourself. She started the engine. She drove the 71 miles back to Lexington on the Bluegrass Parkway through the dark Kentucky night, and she thought about the archive room and the 214 names, and the scholarship folders, and the reel on the projector, and the 4 words her father had written in black marker on a piece of adhesive tape and pressed to the top of a feed reel, sometime before his knees gave out and the projector bulb burned through for the last time. For Ida, when she gets here. She had gotten here. If this story stayed with you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for a new story every week, and leave a comment. What's something someone did for you in secret that you only found out about much later?